I'm Emily Carter, CEO of Carter Ventures, and I will make them pay. Tonight, I stand on the rooftop terrace of our Midtown Manhattan offices, the city lights stretching out like armor against the dark. My Rolex, an $8,000 0 cents timepiece, ticks sharply each beat, reminding me that time is both currency and weapon. Across the street, Morgan Enterprises goes dark, office by office, their lights extinguishing like vultures retreating after the hunt. They believed they could shatter our legacy with forged contracts and silent betrayals. But after nights spent chasing digital footprints and gathering proof of their treachery, I'm ready to strike back. In my hand, I hold a folder packed with damning evidence. Emails exposing secret deals, contracts bearing counterfeit signatures, recordings of covert calls. The wind whispers vengeance as I steel myself for the dawn. Cold night air fuels every fiber of resolve. At sunrise, Carter Ventures will reclaim its throne, and those who dared to betray my family will learn that revenge isn't just a warning, it's an unbreakable vow. I'm Emily Carter, 34, born and raised in suburban Westfield, New Jersey. Now CEO of Carter Ventures, a tech startup I launched at 22. When I look back, the seed of my ambition was planted at our big, boisterous family Thanksgiving dinners. Every October, my parents, James and Deborah Carter, transformed our backyard into a festival of oak leaf garlands, wicker baskets brimming with squash, and long farm tables heaped with turkey and mashed potatoes. My brother Michael, 2 years younger, and I competed for the most outrageous, food-stained shirt, whether from cranberry sauce dribbles or gravy splatters. The house always echoed with laughter, the clink of silverware, and my grandmother's old radio playing Let It Snow on loop. My father, a former Wall Street analyst turned venture philanthropist, would settle at the head of the table in his tailored navy blazer, red tie loosened just so, and offer a toast. To family, to goals, and to never settling for second place. Those words reverberated in me long after the guests had gone home, and only the ticking clock kept me company. Even as a little girl perched on a booster seat, I was already absorbing ledgers and learning to calculate percentages on cocktail napkins. My mother, a corporate lawyer with a pragmatic streak, taught me civility at the table and how to stand my ground in negotiations, whether over the last piece of pumpkin pie or the boardroom contract. By the time I entered high school, I had built a small web design side gig while balancing AP calculus and debate club debates. My first office was my bedroom, decorated with vintage Carnegie Hall posters and 3 monitors I pieced together from Craigslist finds. Michael, on the other hand, prized social sports, football games under Friday night lights and pep rallies. Our parents cheered him on, rain or shine, while I learned to field strip code on Saturday mornings. I watched from the sidelines, cheering as loudly as I could, but never quite feeling the same roaring pride directed my way. My proudest moment came at MIT, summa cum laude, 3 research internships, and a full scholarship. Michael earned a solid B act marking, played wide receiver, and cruised into our dad's alma mater on athletic scholarship. At graduation, our parents drove an hour north to Cambridge, arriving 45 minutes late because, quote, the university roadblocks were a nightmare, and presented Michael with a custom plaque for outstanding team spirit. By the time they reached the ceremony's end, they barely had gas left to toast my own valedictorian speech. I spotted them in the crowd, cell phones out, but only to capture Michael's final touchdown. When I told them I was founding Carter Ventures with a $50,000 0 cents seed check from Dad's philanthropic fund, they offered cautious congratulations. There's always a position waiting at the family office if this doesn't work out, my mother reminded me over dinner at our childhood home. Still, I poured everything into that first year, sleeping on a futon beside my standing desk, living on ramen and trail mix, pitching angel investors one email at a time. Michael called to check in once. But the real turning point was the holiday fundraiser I organized at age 24. I convinced Mayor Thompson's office to donate our town hall's Great Hall for an evening, set up 150 chairs, and invited local entrepreneurs to pitch microgrants to inner-city nonprofits. I hadn't planned on securing any major investment, but by midnight, I'd raised $200,000, 0 cents in pledges, an unprecedented sum for Westfield. And that night, as I looked out on the standing room L crowd, I saw my parents standing in the back. Dad's chest puffed out like a proud peacock. Mom teared up behind her courtroom-hardened facade. Michael stood beside them, clapping enthusiastically. "We're proud of you, Emily," my mother said afterward, her words soft but steady. It was the first time I heard genuine pride in her voice, and it felt like a bullet turned into confetti. From that night on, invitations came more readily. My parents showed up at demo days, industry panels, even late-night code sprints when the next beta release hung in the balance. They never admitted they had underestimated me. Instead, they treated every milestone as proof of their good parenting. Through those early triumphs, I discovered two unshakable truths. First, that hard work could rewrite expectations, and second, that family loyalty could be as volatile as venture capital. The same people who cheered my first win whispered doubts when I hit my first plateau. A loan request to bridge a cash flow gap of $75,000, 0 cents, was met with polite "we'll discuss it later" emails that never came. When I retraced our Thanksgiving archives, I found that each year I had grown stronger, more self-assured, yet the undercurrent of favoritism toward Michael remained. Looking back, the lesson was clear. Blood ties don't guarantee support, and legacy doesn't equate to loyalty. That realization forged my resolve. I steered Carter Ventures through shaky Series A rounds, navigated contract disputes, and scaled our team from 5 to 50 employees. I paid Michael back the $10,000, 0 cents, I'd quietly loaned him when tuition costs unexpectedly rose, charging him 0% interest because he was my brother and I believed family shouldn't profit from family. But I never asked them for a seat at their table again. Now, as Carter Ventures teeters on the brink of collapse, I tap into those memories for strength. The same grit that powered my first fundraiser will fuel my next move. You've heard how I got here, how I built from ramen noodles to rocket launches. So tell me, what's a moment from your past that shaped who you are today? Share it in the comments below, and let's build this community together, because every journey deserves its chapter in the story. But every success story carries the seeds of its own undoing. By spring of that year, Carter Ventures had grown from a 5-person scrappy startup into a team of 30 brilliant developers, marketers, and designers. And yet, beneath the excitement of rapid hiring lay the first tremors of a deeper crisis. It started with a single email. One morning in April, I opened my inbox to see a terse note from Horizon Tech, one of our top 3 clients. They were canceling a $120,000 0 cents quarterly contract effective immediately. No explanation, just a curt apology. My stomach churned. That single line eliminated our entire marketing budget for Q2 and carved a $30,000 0 cents hole in projected cash flow. I forwarded the email to Michael, who tapped back, "We'll handle it." But his voice wavered over the phone. 2 days later, our Series A lead, Crestline Capital, requested an urgent financial update. They wanted detailed P&Ls, burn rate analysis, and a forecast for the next 2 quarters. I spent an entire night in the office slumped over spreadsheets, redlining line items for every expense over $5,000, 0 cents. Rent, utilities, payroll each felt like a landmine. Payroll alone was $45,000, 0 cents every 2 weeks. Cliff vesting for our engineers loomed at the end of the month, another $60,000, 0 cents liability if we didn't hit revenue targets. Then I discovered discrepancies in our revenue reporting. Invoices totaling $75,000, 0 cents, sent 6 weeks earlier, showed up as unpaid in our accounting system, but the bank statements told a different story. Payments had cleared. Someone had deliberately manipulated our records to make it look like cash wasn't coming in. My heart sank. If I couldn't trust our own books, I couldn't reassure investors or employees when we gathered for our all-hands meeting the following Monday. I launched my internal audit. Late nights turned into 3 a.m. research sessions. I traced every email chain, every PDF, every line in QuickBooks. As I followed the digital breadcrumbs, I noticed a pattern. These anomalies all seemed to involve a junior accountant, Carla Reynolds, who reported directly to our CFO. When I confronted Carla, she stammered that she was just following orders and pointed the finger at someone higher up in Morgan Enterprises' finance team, with whom she'd handled outsourced bookkeeping. That revelation sent a chill through me. Morgan Enterprises wasn't just a former competitor. They were the company that had quietly funded our Series A through a silent partner. Now, any betrayal on their side would blow back on us. I felt the weight of every sleepless night return full force. For the first time, the cozy, confident veneer of success cracked, revealing raw fear underneath. At the same time, Michael called with bad news of his own. He'd been planning to close on a residence loan for our family home's renovation, $75,000, 0 cents at 4.2% interest, with a bank that required proof of additional collateral. Our household account, once flush with monthly dividends from Carter Ventures, was suddenly $10,000, 0 cents short. Mom and Dad had been draining our shared savings to cover company overruns without telling me. That sense of betrayal stung sharper than any external threat. By mid-May, our employee morale began to dip. Our head of design, Alicia, announced she was resigning to join a rival. Our lead engineer, Sergio, started logging out earlier each day. Rumors swirled. Is the company losing money? Is Emily hiding something? Should we start looking elsewhere? I sensed rumor mill pick up speed like a freight train. In response, I called an emergency town hall. Standing on the stage in our bright, open conference room, I recounted the Horizon Tech cancellation, outlined the Crestline request, and assured my team that I was fixing it. I shared the steps we'd take, implementing more rigorous accounting protocols, hiring an outside forensic auditor at a cost of $15,000, 0 cents, and freezing all non-essential spending. They applauded, but I saw their eyes. Doubt, anxiety, even loyalty requires evidence. Afterward, I noticed Carla slip out the back door, her shoulders hunched. I cornered her in the hallway. Through trembling tears, she confessed that Morgan's CFO, Jessica Morgan, had pressured her to falsify our records, to destabilize our credibility. Jessica's motive? To weaken Carter Ventures and force us into selling our remaining equity at rock-bottom valuation. A brutal, cold-blooded tactic that hit me in the gut. This betrayal was personal. Staring at Carla's tear-streaked face, I realized the crisis wasn't financial alone. It was existential. My family's name, my life's work, even my teenage dreams of disrupting the tech world were now at war. And the enemy stood not in some dark alley but across the avenue in their gleaming skyscraper. That night I barely slept. My mind raced through every line of every contract for the past 18 months. I printed dozens of documents, emails, invoices, loan applications, stacking them on my desk until they formed a paper wall around me. By dawn, I had a plan to track every duplicate invoice, every phantom transaction, and to expose Morgan's sabotage. I would hire forensic accountants, subpoena emails, and present incontrovertible evidence to our investors, to the press, where I would have to risk our firm's reputation for transparency. Before calling Michael, I paced the rooftop again, clutching a mug of black coffee. The city was waking up. From this vantage, I could see both opportunity and danger coiled together in the streets below. I vowed that Carter Ventures would not only survive this storm, but use it to demonstrate our resilience and to launch the counteroffensive that would bring Jessica Morgan's machinations into the light. At the end of the crisis briefing email I sent to our board that morning, I included a question for our supporters and followers. Have you ever faced a sudden betrayal that shook your confidence to the core? Reply or comment below with your story. Let's turn adversity into action together. The first cracks had formed. Now it was time to see if we could stop the fissure from becoming an earthquake. It was late June when I finally pieced together the scope of the attack. I'd been chasing phantom invoices and phantom revenues for weeks, but nothing prepared me for the bombshell I uncovered in a sealed file drawer beneath my desk. The contract, an official Morgan Enterprises agreement for a $500,000 zero-cent strategic partnership, bore my signature in flowing script, complete with the corporate seal of Carter Ventures. Only, the signature wasn't mine. My hand shook as I held the document up to the light, comparing it side by side with every authentic contract in my records. The ink was too fresh, barely dry, and the pressure patterns in the strokes betrayed a forger's hesitation. Someone had taken the time to replicate my signature, slipped it onto a deal that never existed, and then funneled the money through a shell account in Grand Cayman. The realization slammed into me like a freight train. This was no random act of sabotage. It was a carefully orchestrated coup. I felt my pulse hammering in my temples as I closed the drawer and stormed into Michael's makeshift home office, where he was staring at blueprints for the renovations I'd helped him finance. "Michael," I said, voice taut, "I need you to look at something." His brow furrowed when I slid the document across the table. Without a word, he read it, then looked up, disbelief and indignation warring in his eyes. "They'd go this far?" he whispered. I nodded, eyes burning. "And it gets worse." From my satchel I produced a stack of bank statements, each annotated in my scrawl. There was the deposit, $500,000. 0 cents, time-stamped just past midnight on June 12, routed through the Cayman account, then routed back to Morgan Enterprises, appearing as an internal transfer. They are laundering through themselves to fabricate a false partnership, I said, and I have zero doubt it's Jessica Morgan pulling the strings. Michael leaned back, exhaling. "So that's why Christopher Winters pulled his $250,000 zero-cent commitment last week," he said. "He got spooked by the rumors." Exactly. Christopher Winters had been one of my earliest champions, an Apex Investments partner who'd agreed to back Carter Ventures with a $250,000 zero-cent bridge note when we were struggling to close Series A. His withdrawal had looked like a market concern, but now it read as a direct reaction to fabricated instability. With Christopher out, our runway shortened by 3 months overnight. By dawn, I had assembled the core crisis team in our glass-walled boardroom. Brandon Mitchell, my college friend and informal advisor, Madison Lee, operations director at Morgan Enterprises, who'd been quietly sympathetic, and our newly hired forensic accountants, Teresa Nguyen. The whiteboard was already cluttered with arrows and annotations, false contracts, shell entities, offshore accounts. Madison, I said, drawing her gaze across the table. We need everything you have on Jessica's finance team. Emails, meeting notes, even hallway conversations. Anything that ties her directly to this fraud. Madison swallowed. I've got an encrypted folder of internal memos where she berates Carla about breaking Carter's credibility. I've been collecting them for weeks in case she crossed a line. I'll decrypt and send them now. I tapped my pen on the oak tabletop. Good. Teresa, can you trace the Shell account trail and confirm it loops back to Morgan Enterprises escrow? Already on it, Teresa replied, her voice steady despite the gravity of the task. I'll have preliminary forensics by tomorrow morning. I drew in a slow breath and let it out. Then we prepare for the shareholder meeting. We expose the forgery, the laundering, everything. We bring concrete evidence. And when they ask how we found it, we tell them it's because Carter Ventures refuses to go down without a fight. Brandon, ever the strategist, leaned forward. We should plan a preemptive press release, position the narrative that Morgan Enterprises attempted corporate backstabbing. If we leak it right, public opinion will be on our side, and Jessica's name will be mud before they even vote. I nodded, thinking through the implications. A press release would be risky. It could spook our remaining investors or drive away potential partners. But the alternative was worse, letting Morgan shape the story in their favor. Do it, I said. Have a draft on my desk by noon. Michael, I want you to alert our legal counsel, Alexandra Coleman, and secure a temporary restraining order if necessary to freeze any contested assets. Michael tapped his phone. Already on it. He's calling back in 5 minutes. By mid-afternoon, the air in our once bright boardroom felt like a war room. Teresa reported that the Cayman Shell Company was indeed registered to an offshore trust linked to Morgan CFO. Madison forwarded dozens of screenshots. Jessica's words, unguarded and cruel, demanding glitches be inserted into our QuickBooks files, and mocking my naive idealism. Brandon's PR draft sat ready, bold headlines screaming corporate sabotage exposed. I read through it all and felt a bitter satisfaction. The same halls where Morgan's executives had whispered rumors about Carter Ventures' decline would soon echo with demands for accountability. Yet beneath the satisfaction lay a deeper truth. This was personal. Beyond the money, beyond the contracts, this was an attack on my family's name and the legacy my father had spent decades building. That evening, I found Jessica Morgan in the lobby of our shared building, stepping out of the elevator in her signature silk blouse and tailored skirt. She gave me a calm, calculating smile. Emily, she purred, I hear you've uncovered some irregularities. I met her gaze evenly. I have the evidence, and tomorrow everyone will see it. Jessica's smile tightened. Be careful, Emily. Revenge is a double-edged sword. For a moment, I felt the old doubt creep in that maybe we were overplaying our hand. But then I thought of every late night, every moment of sneering doubt, every time I'd been sidelined in favor of Michael. I thought of the forged signature and the stolen $500,000. No, I said softly. Vengeance isn't a weapon, Jessica. It's a shield. And it's about to protect everything I've built. I hadn't slept in 3 nights. The hum of streetlights outside my apartment window mixed with the relentless buzzing of unanswered work notifications. When I finally dragged myself to the kitchen, I found my coffee mug crusted with old grounds and a sink full of dirty dishes I couldn't muster the energy to clean. I skipped lunch, skipped dinner, skipped anything that might have required paying attention. My world had collapsed into a series of numbing routines. Wake up, pour black coffee, stare at spreadsheets, fall into a fitful nap on the sofa. On the third evening, I realized I was down to my last $12, 0 cents in my checking account after paying the rent for this tiny midtown studio, after covering utilities I couldn't let lapse, after wiring money to the forensic accountants Teresa hired. I stared at the balance as if it were an insult. Carter Ventures had once held millions in runway. Now I couldn't even afford takeout. My heart pounded as I flipped through unopened invoices, past due rent, the PR firm's $10,000, 0 cents retainer, Brandon's advisory fee, our health insurance bill, and Michael's mortgage payment I'd promised him. Each envelope was an accusation. You failed, they all seemed to whisper. I reached for my half-empty bottle of Chivas Regal 18-year, one of the lost luxuries I'd allowed myself when the Series A closed, back when I thought victory was just around the corner. It cost $150, a 0 cents a bottle, a trivial expense at the time, but now it felt obscene. The scotch burned going down my throat, but it dulled the screaming in my head. Outside, rain lashed the windows, turning the world blurry and wet. I sat on the floor, back against the refrigerator, and let the tears come, slowly at first, then in streams that soaked the collar of my cashmere sweater. Memories flickered like a broken projector. I saw my father's proud face when I launched Carter Ventures, my mother's teary nod at that first $200,000. Those moments felt like relics from another life, an idyllic past that had vanished alongside our reputation and our capital. I pulled a notebook from the coffee table and began to write. Letter after letter to Alexandra Coleman, my childhood friend turned legal counsel. I spilled my fear onto every page, the panic that Teresa's reports would come back inconclusive, the dread that Morgan Enterprises lawyers would bury us under motions, the guilt that I'd drag me into this mess when he needed it most. Words blurred as I wrote, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. My pen scratched the paper until it bled ink. At some point, I wrote the same sentence 20 times. I thought I'd built something real. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by the low rumble of thunder. I dropped the notebook, opened the window despite the downpour, and leaned out. Cold rain soaked my hair and dripped down my face as I clung to the sill. The city sounded muffled. Sirens in the distance, tires splashing in puddles, muffled voices echoing off wet pavement. I closed my eyes and let the rain wash over me, the chill a reminder that I was still alive, still breathing. Emily? The voice was soft, hesitant. I recognized Michael's silhouette in the doorway, umbrella still in hand, suit jacket soaked through. He stepped in and wrapped me in his damp coat. For a moment, I resisted exhaustion and shame weighed too heavily, but then I relaxed into his warmth, the tremor in his arms betraying his own fear. He led me to the couch, where he'd spread a blanket. You need to eat, he said, voice gentle. You need to sleep. I shook my head. I'm fine, I whispered, though my voice cracked. He didn't argue. Instead, he sat beside me and dialed my therapist's number, the one I'd resisted seeing until now. When the therapist answered, Michael handed me the phone. The therapist's calm voice in my ear felt like an anchor in a storm. Emily, it's okay to feel overwhelmed, she said. Let's take this one step at a time. I closed my eyes and let myself cry again, softer this time, as she guided me through breathing exercises and reframed just a fraction. Later, after Michael ordered us both a simple meal, no ramen this time, but grilled chicken and steamed vegetables, I managed a few bites. I made him promise he'd stay until morning. He nodded, brushing damp hair from my forehead. "We'll get through this," he said. "Together." As dawn approached, the rain eased into a gentle patter. I sat on the balcony, wrapped in my brother's jacket, watching the city awaken. Lights flickered on in neighboring high-rises. Cabs rolled through wet streets, and steam coiled from manhole covers like ghosts rising. Despite the storm of the past days, a fragile calm settled over me. I glanced at the notebook and the last tear-stained page. The words I thought I'd hit rock bottom were scrawled at the top. I closed the notebook, folded it, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Rock bottom was still below me, but I had a handhold. Michael's steady presence, a scheduled therapy session, and the first home-cooked meal in days were small but tangible signs that I wasn't alone. The storm outside had passed, but I knew storms could return. My heart still hammered with anxiety at every phone buzz, every unopened bill. But now I had a plan: rest, regroup, and face the next challenge with clearer eyes. As the sun rose over Midtown, I whispered into the chill morning air, "I'm not broken. I'm gathering strength." And in that fragile moment before the world fully woke, I realized something vital. Hitting rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the prelude to a comeback. After the darkest nights of my life, I woke to a single text from Michael. "Conference badge is under your name. Benjamin Harris wants to meet you at 9 a.m. Benjamin Harris, venture world legend, had once resurrected a bankrupt hardware startup and sold it for $1,200,000,000, 0 cents. If anyone could shine a light on our crisis, it was him. I forced myself out of bed, trading my rumpled sweatpants for a sharp blazer. The crisp spring air bit at my cheeks as Michael and I hailed a cab to the Financial Futures Conference at the Javits Center. Inside, the lobby buzzed with suits and lanyards. I checked my reflection in a floor-to-ceiling mirror. Bloodshot eyes, hair pulled back, but shoulders squared. Michael handed me a latte. "Fuel," he said. I managed a weak smile. We slipped into the main ballroom just as Benjamin concluded a keynote on turning adversity into advantage. The crowd erupted in applause. He scanned the audience, then locked eyes on me. After the session, security guided me backstage. Benjamin extended his hand. "Emily Carter, I've been following your fight." I took a breath and relayed the betrayals, the forged $500,000, 0 cents contract, the secured ledgers, Jessica Morgan's clandestine maneuvers. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he leaned in and lowered his voice. "You mentioned reserves?" I hesitated. In the frenzy, I'd almost forgotten the $100,000, 0 cents, emergency fund I'd squirreled away years ago. Funds I'd vowed never to touch, except in true crisis. My pulse quickened. "I have it in a separate escrow account," I admitted. Benjamin's lips curved in a knowing smile. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a worn paperback, The Lean Startup. On the title page he wrote, "For your next pivot, trust data, iterate fast, and remember why you began." He tapped the page. "Resources matter, but mindset matters more. You've got both." Word of our meeting spread through the conference grapevine. That afternoon, I commandeered a quiet corner in the hotel lounge and started an Instagram Live. With no script but raw honesty, I faced the camera. "I'm Emily Carter. We've been through hell, but storms don't last forever. If you've ever been knocked down, this one's for you." I invited viewers to support our upcoming product launch via a small investor crowdfunding page. I talked about resilience, about relying on that hidden fund, about trusting my team and community. Within 24 hours, we'd raised $30,000, 0 cents, enough to pay Teresa's forensic auditor, keep our engineers on payroll, and fund a beta release of our flagship app. That evening, as I packed up my laptop, my phone pinged with an encrypted message from Madison Lee. She dug into Morgan Enterprises' internal servers and uncovered troves of evidence, chat logs in which Jessica explicitly ordered the sabotage, budget memos that flagged Carter Ventures as a strategic threat, and a trail of emails confirming the Shell account laundering. Each document was another nail in the coffin of Morgan's conspiracy. Back in my conference hotel room, I spread the files like tarot cards across the bed. The weight of them felt different from the oppression I'd borne days ago. These weren't just proofs of crime, they were tokens of my family's vindication. I traced my finger over lines of code and corporate jargon, letting each revelation burn away self-doubt. Tired but electrified, I drafted a plan. Secure the evidence, use encrypted backups and duplicate storage to prevent tampering. Leverage the story. Craft an email to our entire investor list, framing our comeback around truth and transparency. Mobilize the community. Announce a live Q&A on social media, inviting both supporters and skeptics to ask hard questions. As midnight approached, I paused and closed my eyes. The city hung below taxi sirens, late-night diners, and the distant hum of subway trains. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel paralyzed by fear. I felt a spark. The next morning, Michael and I held a brief all-hands at our temporary office space. I laid out the $100,000 0 cents fund, showed the Instagram Live metrics, and revealed Madison's evidence. Faces that had been drawn and skeptical brightened with cautious optimism. Questions flew. When can we go live with the proof? What's our PR timeline? Can we reopen hiring? I answered each with clarity I hadn't thought I'd muster. By the end, the room thrummed with renewed energy. Our head of marketing drafted a press release. Our CTO prepped a demo of our beta app. Our legal counsel prepared a formal submission to both the SEC and the media outlets that would publish our story. Teresa Luyen, our forensic accountant, promised a full report by week's end. That afternoon, I met Benjamin for coffee in a corner cafe. He slid across the table a business card. I'll introduce you to 2 partners who can help you expand that crowdfunding beyond Instagram, private investors who respect grit. He studied me. This is a movement now, Emily, not just a comeback. Keep that fire alive. I left the cafe with a new spring in my step. The hidden fund had been only the beginning. I had allies, proof, and a blueprint for transparency that would turn our vulnerability into our greatest strength. More than rescuing Carter Ventures, we were rewriting our narrative from victim to victor. That night, on another Instagram Live, I closed with a simple question for our audience. What's your spark when all seems lost? Share in the comments and let's lift each other up. Within minutes, our feed flooded with fire emojis and messages of solidarity. I smiled, feeling the momentum roll over me like a wave. The road ahead was still steep: legal battles, media interviews, product deadlines. But I had reclaimed agency. I was no longer reacting to betrayal. I was steering the comeback. As I shut down my laptop, I tucked Madison's files into a secure portfolio, zipped tight. Tomorrow we'd file our story with the press and board. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of genuine relief. The embers of hope glowed bright, fueled by 3 essentials: the hidden $100,000, 0 cents reserve, Benjamin Harris's mentorship and his dog-eared copy of the Lean Startup, and a community rallied by authenticity. I lay in bed, replaying the day's milestones, and whispered into the darkness. This is no longer survival. This is rebirth. And with that, I drifted into my first peaceful sleep in weeks, dreaming not of battles lost, but of victories yet to come. Morning light slanted through the glass walls of the conference room as I gathered my team around the long oak table. We'd secured the damning evidence, Mezzadin's decrypted memos, Teresa's forensic report tracing the Cayman Shell account back to Morgan Enterprises, and Christopher Winters's confirmation that his withdrawal had been triggered by the false documents. Today, we would expose the conspiracy and seize control of our own narrative. I clicked on the projector remote. The first slide displayed a timeline from the forged $500,000 0 cents contract on June 12th, through the phantom invoices in late May, to the moment Christopher Winters withdrew his $250,000 0 cents bridge note. Each entry was backed by source citations, email headers, bank statements, meeting minutes. I cleared my throat. This is how Morgan Enterprises tried to dismantle Carter Ventures, I began. And this boardroom is where they picked the wrong opponent. I introduced Alexandra Coleman, my longtime friend and legal counsel, who stood and addressed the shareholders. In a measured voice, he outlined our case: evidence of document forgery, orchestrated liquidity manipulation, and deliberate sabotage by Morgan's CFO, Jessica Morgan. He referenced specific corporate bylaws that Jessica had violated, and he informed the group that we had initiated a temporary restraining order to freeze contested assets. Murmurs rippled through the audience as Alexander clicked to a slide showing transcripts of Jessica's own words ordering the tampering. At that point, Christopher Winters, invited as our independent investor witness, rose and offered his testimony. He recounted the phone call he received, in which he was told Carter Ventures was hemorrhaging cash and was no longer a viable investment. He then revealed that he'd personally called our accounting department to verify, only to discover the inconsistencies himself, and that his $250,000 0 cents commitment had been withdrawn under false pretenses. His admission lent credibility and gravitas to our revelations. Brandon Mitchell followed with a concise public relations strategy. "We need to control this story from the outset," he said. He presented a draft press release with a bold headline: "Carter Ventures unmasks corporate sabotage by Morgan Enterprises," followed by bullet points summarizing the evidence and our demands. Jessica Morgan's immediate removal from the board of Morgan Enterprises, restitution of the $500,000 0 cents plus interest, and a formal apology published in the Financial Times. He emphasized that we would give Morgan Enterprises 48 hours to comply before going to the general press. I watched shareholders exchange looks, some skeptical, some intrigued. Their questions came fast. What about potential backlash from Morgan's PR machine? Could this lawsuit's backfire on our valuation? Are we prepared for an extended legal battle? I answered each with the facts. Our evidence was airtight. Our reserve fund and crowdfunding momentum would sustain operations. And our community was already rallying behind us as champions of transparency. I felt a calm conviction I hadn't known in months. When the vote was called to authorize the press release, and legal action, hands shot up in support. The room erupted in applause. In that moment, I realized we'd flipped the script, from defenseless victim to decisive challenger. As the meeting adjourned, I shook hands with each shareholder, including a visibly chastened Morgan Enterprises representative, whose forced acceptance of the resolution was a silent admission of defeat. Back in my office, I drafted the final press release with Brandon's copywriter and Alexandra's legal revisions. We included a hyperlink to a secure online vault containing the redacted evidence, inviting journalists and industry analysts to review the primary documents. I formatted the release for syndication at 8:00 a.m. the next day. Then I turned to my laptop and composed an email to our investor list. Dear partners, after weeks of investigation, Carter Ventures has confirmed orchestrated sabotage by Morgan Enterprises CFO. We stand by our commitment to transparency and integrity. Please find attached our full evidence dossier. We appreciate your continued support and look forward to a stronger, more resilient future together. Emily Carter, CEO. I saved the draft and scheduled it for distribution immediately following the press release. That evening, I met Madison and Teresa at a quiet bistro near our office. Over wine, we toasted to reclamation. Madison passed me her tablet, showing that our crowdfunding campaign had spiked another $20,000, 0 cents, after I'd posted a teaser about an imminent major announcement. Teresa rubbed her temples and laughed. I need a vacation after this audit, but damn, this is satisfying. I smiled, picturing each hacker's keystroke that had tried to bury us now laid bare. On the way home, I drafted a social media post. Truth cannot be buried. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., Carter Ventures exposes corporate sabotage by Morgan Enterprises. Read the full story and download the evidence at We built this company on integrity, now we prove it. I scheduled it. Then I slipped into bed, my mind racing with the fallout to come, media pickups, expert commentary, potential countersuits. But for the first time in months, I felt in control. At 7:59 a.m. the next morning, I refreshed my laptop. The press release had gone live. Headlines across TechCrunch, Bloomberg, and Forbes began to appear. Startup CEO Emily Carter strikes back at corporate sabotage. Morgan Enterprises accused of undermining venture partner transparent showdown. Carter website crashed briefly under the traffic surge, proof that our narrative was resonating. Notifications flooded in, supportive tweets from Silicon Alley influencers, shared posts from small business owners, congratulatory emails from unexpected corners. A reporter from the New York Times requested an exclusive interview. I forwarded the request to Alexander, who scheduled it for later that day. During the interview, I spoke firmly about accountability and the importance of ethical stewardship in venture funding. I acknowledged the hardship my team had endured, and I pledged that Carter Ventures would emerge not just solvent, but stronger, dedicated to supporting other founders who faced adversity. I watched as my words were transcribed, knowing they'd reach thousands of readers who might once have dismissed our firm as just another startup. By sunset, Christopher Winters had committed to reinvest $250,000, 0 cents, restoring his original pledge. Benjamin Harris offered to host a roundtable for emerging female founders at his firm's offices, spotlighting our story. Our inbox filled with partnership inquiries, and most importantly, Carter Ventures' runway had been extended by at least 6 months, more than enough to execute our next product launch on a decisive timeline. That night, as I stood on my own rooftop far above the midtown bustle, I replayed the day's victories. The dark skyscraper of Morgan Enterprises across the street was still lit in places, but its glare felt diminished, outmatched by the floodlights of our own resolve. I raised a glass of water in a silent toast and whispered, "We turned the tables and we'll keep turning them until justice is served. Tomorrow begins the next chapter. But tonight, I revel in the fact that Carter Ventures no longer bowed to shadowy forces. We've claimed our truth, and in doing so, we reclaimed our future." I'm Emily Carter, and there's a chapter of our family history that few know but whose lessons run under every decision I make today. When Dad James Carter was in his early 30s, he inherited a 50-acre apple farm north of Westfield, New Jersey. Not long after, real estate developers came knocking with a $1 million offer, eager to raise the orchard and build tract homes. Dad refused. He'd grown up there, learning the value of hard work by picking apples at dawn alongside his farm. He told me later that the land represented more than profit. It held memories, principles, and the promise of something enduring. Money can buy almost anything, he said, but if you sell your roots, you lose your compass. Years passed, and I found myself facing a parallel choice with Carter Ventures. During our Series A negotiations, a major investor valued the company at $2 million and offered generous capital in exchange for half our equity. I remembered Dad's farm, the silent testament to his integrity, and decided to counteroffer. Instead of sacrificing control, I negotiated extended milestones and performance-based tranches. That decision preserved our autonomy and set us on a path to sustainable growth without yielding half our vision. When Morgan Enterprises launched their attack, Dad watched quietly. Then, in a gesture emblematic of his understatement, he reached into his personal holdings of Morgan common stock shares he'd bought years ago when he believed in the partnership and transferred $50,000 worth directly into Carter Ventures' escrow account. No announcement, no conditions. He simply ensured we had extra collateral to cover urgent legal fees. I discovered the transfer the morning I was drafting motion papers. It felt like his way of stepping onto our rooftop, wrapping me in that same sense of security I'd felt as a child. This side story underscores what family legacy means at Carter Ventures. It's not just balance sheets or landmark fundraising rounds, but the unspoken commitments we keep when it matters most. My father's refusal to commoditize his heritage taught me that principles often outvalue immediate gains. His secret infusion of Morgan shares reminded me that when stakes are highest, true allies move in silence, guided by loyalty rather than fanfare. Those lessons live on in every boardroom decision I make, and they remind me that, no matter how fierce the storm, our deepest roots will always anchor us. I never thought I'd see Jessica Morgan brought to her knees, yet here she stands outside the courthouse steps, in a tailored navy suit that once signaled power, but now reads as a uniform of disgrace. The judge's gavel fell like thunder. Jessica was ordered to pay $200,000, 0 cents in penalties, permanently barred from any board role at Morgan Enterprises, and to reimburse every dollar siphoned from Carter Ventures. Watching her hands tremble as she signed the restitution order was a moment I'd once dreamed of in the privacy of my dark plotting sessions. She tried to maintain composure, lips pressed thin, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, but when she glanced up and caught my gaze, I saw raw panic. The woman who'd orchestrated the theft of $500,000, gambled with our lives, and spread lies for her own gain, now faced the public reckoning she so richly deserved. Within hours, news outlets carried the verdict across front pages. Morgan CFO convicted of corporate sabotage, splashed on Bloomberg. Revenge served cold in Manhattan court on the New York Post. Startup visit conglomerate the David and Goliath story on Forbes. Headlines that once lauded her as a visionary now painted her as a pariah. Social media exploded with celebrations of justice. Fire emojis, Jessica exposed, and retweets of our press release, which I quietly credited to Teresa's airtight forensic report. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Investors pulled funding from Morgan's subsidiary Ventures, share prices dipped by 3.4%, and her closest allies distanced themselves in corporate press statements. The penthouse she'd boasted, about 2 floors of glass and steel overlooking Central Park, purchased for $2,500,000, 0 cents, using illicit funds, suddenly felt like a gilded cage. Within days of the verdict, real estate agents lined the lobby to show prospective buyers. I heard she accepted an offer 20% below market value, desperate to liquidate assets before creditors closed in. I didn't attend her auction. Instead, I watched from my office window as moving vans scraped the pavement, hauling her luxury furniture and personal effects into waiting trucks. The same balconies she used to survey her empire now stood bare, a monument to hubris undone. In the courthouse plaza, a small crowd gathered to gawk. I allowed myself a quiet nod of satisfaction, a cold acknowledgement that justice, though delayed, had arrived. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected email. "Can we talk?" It was from Jessica herself. She requested a private meeting in a neutral location. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to leave her to her fate, but another part, the part that believed in turning calamity into closure, agreed. We met in a secluded cafe in Tribeca. She looked gaunt, her tailored suit replaced by a simple gray coat. Her voice was low, contrite. "I never wanted it to end like this," she whispered, eyes glistening. "I was desperate to prove myself to my father, to Morgan's board, to everyone who ever doubted me." She slid an envelope across the table, a check for $210,000, 0 cents, covering her fine plus accrued interest. "I can't undo what I did, but I can start making it right." I watched her for a long moment. The woman who'd once been my greatest adversary now looked smaller than I'd ever imagined. Guilt and pity warred inside me, but the memory of every sleepless night, every fraudulent invoice, and every threat to my family's legacy held firm. "I accept the payment," I said finally, voice steady. "But I won't offer a forgiveness today." My words landed like a verdict. She nodded, lowered her gaze, and stood abruptly. "Thank you," she murmured, then slipped away into the afternoon crowd. As I walked back to my office, the envelope felt heavier than it should have, an admission of accountability, but also a reminder that some debts can't be settled with money alone. The lesson lingered. True power isn't in vengeance, but in the integrity we uphold when faced with betrayal. And so Jessica Morgan's chapter ends, not with redemption, but with a stark choice. Rebuild a life from the ruins of her own making, or remain haunted by the consequences she cannot erase. Either way, my family's legacy stands intact, its roots deep and unshaken. I watched the sunrise spill gold across the Manhattan skyline as I stood on the balcony of our new office, Carter's Ventures headquarters, reborn. After months of betrayal, collapse, and fierce comeback, the final piece of our turnaround had snapped into place. Our flagship app launch had netted a $1,200,000, 0 cents contract with Clearview Health, a nationwide network of clinics looking to integrate our AI-driven patient triage platform. The deal not only stabilized our runway for the next 12 months, but also validated every sleepless night I'd endured. In the week after the verdict against Jessica Morgan, our legal team negotiated a separate settlement. Morgan Enterprises agreed to transfer $300,000, 0 cents, in liquid assets to Carter Ventures Emergency Fund, on top of the court-ordered restitution. That cushion allowed us to rehire key talent lost during the crisis. Our head of data science, 2 senior engineers, and Alicia, our former design lead, who left for a rival only to return when she saw our integrity in action. We also restored Christopher Winter's $250,000, 0 cents bridge note, and he doubled down with an additional $150,000, 0 cents, impressed by the transparency we'd championed. Back in the bright, open-plan office, I stood before my team of 50 and shared the news. Faces that had been haunted with anxiety just weeks before lit up with pride. I felt a wave of gratitude and the weight of a lesson drilled into me through fire. Resilience isn't about surviving a storm, it's about learning to dance in the rain. Over the din of congratulations and clinking coffee mugs, I asked everyone to gather for a brief meeting. I built this company on the principle that integrity transcends profit. I began, voice steady. We've proven that when you refuse to bow to corruption, when you fight for truth and hold one another accountable, you can outlast any crisis. Our future rests on that foundation. I unveiled our next initiative, the Carter Founders Fund, a $250,000, 0 cents annual grant dedicated to empowering underrepresented entrepreneurs, with a special focus on women-led startups in tech. This fund would be managed by a rotating council of our own diverse leadership team, ensuring that emerging founders receive not just capital, but mentorship and strategic guidance. The announcement was met with cheers. It felt fitting that from the ashes of Morgan's sabotage, we'd cultivate a legacy of empowerment. As the meeting adjourned, I took a moment alone in my office. I opened my laptop and drafted the script for my TEDx talk, scheduled for 3 weeks later at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. The title, From Betrayal to Breakthrough: The Power of Ethical Resilience. I planned to share our story, the forged contracts, the dark nights, the moments I thought I'd broken, but most importantly, how choosing integrity had transformed adversity into opportunity. That afternoon, I met Dad for lunch at our favorite West Village deli. He beamed as I told him about the Clearview contract and the Carter Founders Fund. His eyes glistened. "You didn't just rebuild a company," he said, voice thick with pride. "You redefined what success means, for yourself, for this family, and now for countless others." His words reminded me of the apple orchard he refused to sell and the secret $50,000, 0 cents, he'd transferred at our darkest hour, silent acts of loyalty that shaped my own leadership. In the days leading up to my TEDx appearance, media outlets continued to spotlight our comeback. Forbes ran a feature titled "Revenge Reimagined: How Emily Carter Turned Corporate Sabotage into Social Impact." TechCrunch invited me to guest spread a special series on ethical scaling for startups. And an influential venture capital podcast asked me to join a panel on boundaries, betrayal, and boardrooms. Everywhere I turned, our narrative of transparency and empowerment resonated. On the night of the TEDx event, I paced backstage, rehearsing my opening line. "I am Emily Carter, and I once believed that vengeance was a weapon. Today, I want to show you why it's actually a compass." Stepping onto the stage under the warm lights, I felt a calm certainty. The audience, entrepreneurs, investors, students, leaned in as I recounted our journey, weaving in data points, the $75,000, 0 cents hole in our spring cash flow, the 3.4% dip in Morgan Enterprises stock, the $30,000, 0 cents, raised via Instagram Live, and the final $1,200,000, 0 cents contract that sealed our future. Each figure underscored the power of resilience, accountability, and community. As I concluded, I looked directly at the camera and said, "If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Self-worth isn't measured by the money you make, but by the principles you keep when money is at stake. Your boundaries are your blueprint for a legacy that outlives you." The room erupted into a standing ovation. Backstage, the host embraced me. "That was one of the most authentic talks I've ever seen," he said. Walking home that night, the city lights reflecting in puddles from a recent rainstorm, I felt grounded in a way I never had before. The echo of applause still hummed in my ears, but more resonant was the knowledge that our story now belonged to anyone who's ever been betrayed. Anyone who's ever wondered if they had the strength to rebuild. Carter Ventures had not only survived it, had set a new standard for ethical leadership in tech. I tucked my TEDx notes into a folder labeled Archives, alongside the forged contract that started it all, so that future generations at Carter Ventures would remember how far we'd come. And as I closed the door to my apartment, I whispered into the quiet night, "This is why I fight not for vengeance, but for a future built on truth." If you found hope in this story, hit like and subscribe for more inspiring journeys, and remember, your integrity is your greatest